go ahead, Schmarzo. Hit him up, babe.
Yeah, we're just talking. I'm not sure if you guys edit it. I don't edit things, so
No.
You guys okay? Well, I mean,
No,
you
no
guys
way.
want to do
Go.
an intro? If you want an intro,
No intro. We're just going into it. If people don't know who you are, like it's Max Schmarzo, Strong by Science. Like people know who you are. Go ahead.
I'm wearing because it's March, and I wanted to wear my Joey Dorsey Memphis jersey because college basketball. But we do have slam ball has been reinstated as a potential sport, and so I went with a hybrid, the best dunker in NBA. So we went with Sean Kemp jersey today.
There you go.
And people are curious
Well
if
done.
I'm rocking a Sonics jersey. There's a big amalgamation of decisions to decide whether or not I pick that. a lot of thought went into this. We were just talking about training, and I moved out here. I think it's good for coaches to hear. It's something I wish I knew when I was a younger coach. I'm not like an old coach, I guess, but you go through school and you think, oh, everyone's gonna, I want to do this program or be that program, whatever, and you realize that like life's really short and you should really like what you do. And I enjoy being with my wife, and I want to have family around. And I've had some wonderful people call me with some wonderful opportunities for professional sports. And like, I don't want to travel 82 games. Like, I just don't. Like, I don't like to wake up past 6 a.m. and like I want to be here. And it's okay if one day strength conditioning isn't my job and I have to go do a normal person job. It's been a really fun run, and I hope it doesn't end. And but like I would probably have it end if it meant spending more time with my family and my friends. It'd be kind of unfortunate because lots of reading went down to yield minimal results. But that's kind of how I kind of view it, and I really enjoy it. And I always want to make sure that I enjoy what I'm trying to do, and that makes it at least a lot more consistent because we do these college internships, and that's how I met you. Was the Iowa internship, and it was an unfortunate situation where I lived because I lived in North Liberty, and we had construction in North Liberty, so it took me 20 minutes to get out of North Liberty. It's not a far drive, so I would wake up at 2:30 a.m. every
Dude,
day.
that's because our intern, like, it was fucking, it was like looking back on the shit that we used to fucking do. Sick. Like, just fucking sick.
In a weird way, I actually liked it because it made you really decide then and there, is this for you? And so, in retrospectively, I would never do it again.
No.
But it's sometimes that's part of that job, and some people really enjoy that, and that's okay. And I'm glad I entertained the, very difficult one the first time, because I think you'd get a false perception of possibly how nice things might be in other internships. It wasn't. It was a great educational stuff, and we learned a lot, but it was just really rugged hours. And so I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to wake up at 2:30 a.m. anymore. I remember, and this is more this again the unfortunate. You didn't have to wake up at 2:30 a.m. It was just like I had to park and walk there, and the process of all of it was stupid and plain on my part. And I remember my now wife lived like 3 blocks from that area where the weight room was, so I'd go see her afterwards. And I walked to see her, and it was like the last day, and I was like cold sweats, and she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I think I'm fatigued." She's like, you should lay down. And I was like, okay. And like I remember just like that moment. I'm like, nah, I'm not cut out. I'm not cut from that cloth. Like maybe some people are. I'm soft. I don't want to do that.
I had no idea. I really did. Like, I didn't think. I thought you loved it. You did a great job faking it for anybody. Like, for whatever that's worth to you.
I really enjoyed it at the time, but it doesn't mean because you're in something you don't like that you're not going to make an enjoyment out of it. Like, it's a lot of people wanted that opportunity. And I remember you guys made fun of me because I have the athletic training background. That's why I wore khakis. And
I forgot about that.
And a button up and a tie, because that's what you wear as an athletic trainer. And everyone's in sweats. And I'm in this outfit, and you're like, you and DeMarco were like, Max, you don't need to wear that, right? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I just thought I was supposed to wear this. And I enjoyed it. Absolutely loved the working with the athletes and whatever, all that fun stuff. It just, I don't want to wake up that early. I just, as corny as that sounds, people, I just don't want to. I'd rather take a 9 to 5 that I can wake up at 8 a.m. or 7:30, and I have a very blessed opportunity here. I make my wife breakfast every morning, and I make her lunch, and it's just like, I love that. That's very fun, and that's priceless to me. So I try to really understand my priorities. And that was like a very quick way to realize I didn't really want to do that, and nothing against it. It just wasn't my cup of tea.
I mean, I forget who else you've interned with, but like y'all did. I remember we had like the 500, the 545 deadlift competition, the vertical jump. Like y'all, I mean, your internship class, from what I remember, you don't need to correct me, but like it was super strong, super athletic. Like there was multiple dudes ripping, 550 on a straight bar deadlift.
That wasn't. No one could actually lift it. There was some level of like sheer willpower from the heavens above that forced us to lift it. It wasn't like any of us were strong enough to actually lift that. It was Simon Ovenkamp, who's now.
Oh yeah.
Simon couldn't get a job in the U.S. and then went to go manage, and he's like director of 5 of German OTCs. And then Pete Reams.
Yep.
Brandon, a.k.a. Bronco. I actually run into Bronco every now and then.
The Bronco. Holy shit.
I'm the only person
Mechaleki.
Yes,
holy shit.
He was at Colorado State, and then I bumped him at Stanford, and I still call him Bronco. Yep. Great dude. Love that guy.
The Bronco. Oh, my God. Yeah.
And then Sam. I don't know Sam's last name.
Sam Kowarski.
Yes, Sam. First name's a lot.
He was at UCLA for a little bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that was the crew, and it was fun, and we learned a lot, and it was a good eye-opening experience, but just really wasn't my kind of cup of tea.
For you who, you had the connection with Cody because of Co. And you mentioned the athletic training background. Like, do you think that had you decided to actually be a strength and conditioning coach, if it wasn't as intense right away, like, do you think that skill set of the ATC plus being a strength coach could have been like that perfection, especially now? Because, I mean, we're talking, that was back in 2015, right? Like, 8 years, like, you were ahead of the time.
Yeah, just a lazy trendsetter. I only got both because it was like 2 different courses at Co, and I didn't know what to decide. My roommate wanted to be an athletic trainer, and so I didn't know what that was, and I signed up to be one when I was like a freshman, and you had to like apply immediately. And I went into the interview, and they sat me down, and they were like, why do you want to be an athletic trainer? And I had no idea what an athletic trainer was.
Because he does.
Because California doesn't actually have a law at that time. You need an athletic trainer. So in high school, we never had one. Only state that didn't require it at the time. And so I go in there, and I start talking about like weightlifting. And they're like, that's not what this is. And then I pulled out my ass. I was like, yeah, but I need to be a Swiss Army knife in this position because I'll be handling across. And they were like, oh, yes. I was like, oh, I saved that by just a hair. Because they were like, why did you learn about us through like men's fitness or strength conditioning journals? And I was like, oh, because it requires to have a diverse background. So I got into the program, and I enjoyed the schooling because it was very different in the approach of strength conditioning. You learn anatomy much more detail. You learn mechanisms of injury and all this stuff. Do I think it helped me? It made me more arrogant because I thought I knew something others didn't. When it wasn't like I did know something others didn't, but others knew a lot more than me that I didn't as well. And so it made me get humbled really quick. And that was the biggest thing I left that internship was I remember being very embarrassed. And I was like really ashamed of myself when it ended because I felt like I knew so little. And I was a guy with 2 degrees. I had an ATC. I was going to be a master's at Iowa State. And I was really ashamed of myself. And I thought like, wow, like, I don't know. I kind of was never really a smart kid in school. And I felt really dumb at the end of all that. And that you guys knew all this stuff. And I promised myself it wasn't going to be reading that held me back. Because there's so much verbiage and words used I didn't understand what they meant. And it's just, I had this whole pedigree, schooling of athletic training. And I was like, well, I should know all this stuff, but I don't know any of it. And so I felt really dumb. And that was the biggest thing I remember leaving there was I was just so embarrassed of myself. And I was like embarrassed to like run into you guys. Cause I just felt like I was so dumb. But Brian Dermody had a file that he gave everyone of all the books and all the resources and articles. And you could like download that and like go over at the end of your internship. It was like some books or stuff that you guys have had for the courses. And I read every single file on that twice.
Holy shit.
And I just, for like 3 years, I just read it because I was just so embarrassed. And then I realized, like, that was really cool and really helpful. But that's the schooling I wish I had when I was in school because it was heavy science-based. And then it wasn't really in this competitive environment like an internship can be when, like, guys are weird and they're, like, kind of trying to set you up for failure. Not you guys, but, like, other interns are, like, sabotaging you. And you're like,
oh, yeah, they said to set it up over there. And you're like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, they would do that. It was like, what is this? Let me some like the kumbayas of athletic trainers. Like, you need help taping someone? I'll come over and help you out. Here it's like, yes, the hurdle's supposed to be set up with the leg that way. And they're like,
oh yeah, and you know that you'd get the fucking heat brought on you if it wasn't.
Yeah, so that's kind of how that went. And then the background helped with a lot of stuff, understanding a variety of things because you got exposed to stuff. So yeah, and it helps me in my current position what I do now quite a bit more than I did at the time, I guess, previously. Just the knowledge background per se, not necessarily. I'm not a practicing athletic trainer, but having the knowledge to communicate across domains is very helpful.
You mentioned the Iowa State thing, and I remember that you were going there, and then out of nowhere, DeMarco was like, "Hey, did you know? Like, look at what he's doing. Like, how did you know back in 15 or 16 to start doing what you were doing and start putting out content for free? Because I mean, you were again way ahead of the game."
I did it when I pooped. Like, it's that simple. Like, hey, people are like, "What's the plan?" Like, I don't know. I pooped every day, and then like I posted on social media. And, like, that was, like, the extent. People, like, think there's, like, some grandiose plan of, like, oh, how'd you get content out? I don't know. Like, I filmed stuff, and what had happened to Iowa State in a grad program, you kind of show up, and my professor, I was, like, his last master student. Like, he forgot that I was his student. And so I'm, like, a year and a half in, and, like, there's, like, zero guidance. And all I've done is I went, like, into the catacombs, and I was, like, so, like, is this how it works? Like, I guess I gotta learn everything on my own. I was so afraid again. And they had a whole section of, like, old, really good research. Like, foreign research, all the Olympic med books, all the Pavo Comis, all the... just, like, in this dusty old cavern. And I was a grad student, and I checked out every single one. I had, like, 45 books. I had an unlimited checkout. And I'm in Iowa State. My now wife is at Iowa, and I live with my cousins, and I have, like, one class a day, and I don't know anyone. So I played Halo and read books all day. Like, and then I was reading the books, and I'm like, this stuff is so cool. I didn't know there was a science to training. I only ever read, like, Elite FTS, which is great, and they do great information, but they're not telling you about stretch-specific silence periods and neuromuscular firing patterns and how, like, these guys train this way, and these are the granular aspects of science that is exciting, and they're kind of like puzzle pieces, because at the end of the day, we talk about macro stuff, like, oh, what's the program, what's the squat, what's the that, and you can kind of get away with it, but we don't ever talk about, like, the building blocks, and I always kind of felt like when you read the building blocks, if you ever I just watched the Lego movie the other day, randomly, by the way, kind of a funny movie, it's okay, not very good. But there's like a master builder is the idea of it. He can build the Legos. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like you get the Lego pieces now. Instead of just like following the put together pieces, like, oh, I'm gonna build the castle or the X-Wing because it tells me to put X, Y, and Z here. It's like, oh, I know that this 3-piece goes with this little 4-piece, and I can make my own thing. And when you learn the building blocks of it, and so I read a ton, and it really helped. And I was really embarrassed because I like didn't train anyone because I was in grad school. And I was like, well, no one's going to listen to me, so I just did it it's under Strong by Science. I thought it was a cool name. And I was like, I'm not going to put my name on it, because who's going to listen to me? Like, I wouldn't listen to me. And so I was like, I'll just let the knowledge do the speaking, and then if they like it, they like it. And that's kind of what happened.
No, that's awesome. And then you started, from what I remember, you got hooked up with the G Flight, and then you, like you said, we were talking before, you went out to Colorado. Like, how did it all keep evolving for you? Like, did you chase it, or did opportunities come to you?
No, I like this stuff, and I like to tinker with things, and I like to learn. And then there's certain things that come up that, whether it was the opportunity in front of you, or someone came to you, or however it might be, and you might be able to provide value to an extent, and at a certain point in time, you might no longer be able to provide value, and there's another option you might be able to provide value. It's kind of just being open. I think we like to get so, especially in strength and conditioning, and I speak about this as a guy who's not, like, in the college setting, so I hate to step on anyone's toes, but we don't make anything that's tangible. We don't. It's not like, oh, this is objectively a better pizza than someone else's. And the thought experiment I had recently was how long would it take from, like, the perfect program ever made? Let's say we have a group of 20 athletes, right? Or 40, and then two groups of 20 exactly the same.
Yeah.
If we had the most perfect program ever, and we gave it to these 20 athletes, and then we had the 20 athletes just pick random exercises and do them, how long will it take for the layperson to recognize a difference in the programming? And I was like, man, like, it might be a very long time. Like it really might. Like how can not us, the strength coach, like this guy, whatever, but like how can the lay person see the changes on the field differently? And when you start to think about that, it makes us really question. Like we don't make things that are acutely tangible. It takes time, and humans have a lot of trouble with time. We don't think in terms of weeks, months, years. We're not good at aggregated statistics. We never were evolved to deal with large quantities of numbers. You think about your sampling rate and evolutionary times. You probably only came in contact with 100 people like in a year, and now you have 10,000 people tweet you in a day. And so, like the amount of information and our sampling of time is so different. And so, what I'm trying to say is, when we build a program, it's hard to say immediately whether or not that's a good program or not. And so we fight for it. And we combat people like, oh, no, this is right or that's right. And it's us like fighting our peers and the athletes like, hey guys, like I'm over here. And it's kind of like, well, what happens if I even convince you my program's right? First off, regardless of where the cards fall, it's either right or wrong. I can convince you it's right, but it could still be wrong. So who cares if you think my program's right? Secondly, if I win the argument, do I now train your athletes? Like, is it like, haha, now I am right, so give me your, I don't want more, like, no, I can't handle that many athletes. I mean, you can keep them. So I don't really know why and that's why I get frustrated with our strength and conditioning, because our discourse becomes combative. And I think it centers around the fact we don't have the ability to acutely say, based on today, that program was the best one. And so we're constantly trying to justify our program because we don't understand the time course of, how to actually look at that and think about it and consider it. So our next best is to build the wall and get the spear and fight off everyone who might try and come tell us our program's wrong. And that's what you see commonly like in the discourse of stuff. And even as as someone going through schooling, like that's how you're taught. Don't question why you back squat. How dare you? You're like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, okay, don't stab me with the spear. That's kind of a rant. I don't want to go off that topic, but that's where I kind of stand with some of the schooling stuff and how I get involved with things is I like to try new things. I didn't even answer your question at all. I kind of just went rambling. And I think it's fun to try new things. And like you're doing a new thing here, and it's probably a lot more fun. It's cool. It's exciting, and you get to challenge yourself, and you get to talk to people, and you get to build things. And as humans, we like to build things, and I like to build different things. And it's kind of like building stuff. And life's short, and one day it'll end. So let's try and do cool stuff.
No, 100%. And if you could give, you have a platform here now, but what would be your piece of advice that you'd continue to give to coaches that are in it now? Like, hey, okay, you're out of it, you're detached, point of view, whatever. What's your piece of advice to how to make the field better?
Oh, I've gotten some arguments with that. I don't think there's kind of, two steps to that. How would I push the field forward is a great question. I think we got to evaluate why the field hasn't been pushed forward in 20 years.
Ooh.
And we have some stuff, but the field has been measured better. The granularity of information is better. But we still harpen back on older books and older texts and older knowledge as concrete foundations for what we're trying to accomplish. And so there are some arguments I would like from the NSCA for the journals. It'd be nice to have a little more continuity in research. In terms of you can pick up a research book, or I read them every month. They come in, and it's just like a series of 30 research papers. And you're like, this is great, but like, where'd that come from? Can I get like a subtext? Like, what was the one that this came from, so I can follow a thread, so we can build evidence? Because right now, the burden of evidence accumulation is upon the reader. And if I have to read constantly these new articles coming out and then aggregate the evidence and have to then assume I missed some evidence and then come to a decision, it's just a lot of work for very little yield. That might be like I do 4 versus 3 reps, and so. There's not much of an incentive for that push because the burden of information consumption is so difficult, especially if you're trying to read research papers. As a group of practitioners trying to push the field forward, I think our ways of thinking should be evaluated. I think we need to talk about how we think about evidence. It's in percent confidence you speak with. You never speak in absoluteness. And not everything is 100. Nothing will be 100%. So it's always probabilistic in nature, and there's probability within it. and understanding like percent weighted variables and percent explanation can help resolve a lot of the general infighting. One of the things, if you think about like a young athlete and lifting weights and someone who lifts weights and they get stronger and they run faster, very simple example, people would say, oh, well, getting strong is the reason why they ran fast. Well, when you're so weak, the percent explanation of strength is probably higher than anything else, because if they're by default they're weak and we've defined that, then stronger is defined as a rate limiting factor, and it probably has some 40% explained variance in the outcome of performance. But as they get stronger, that maybe only becomes 15%. And so if your objective view is constantly with a youth demographic and they're getting stronger and faster, you're going to have this chronic biasing of saying strength is going to make us faster. And that could be fact. There's a difference between fact and reason. So, and that's a huge debate we have. You have, like, say, is it factual? Squatting and getting their legs stronger made them faster? Yeah, that's a fact. What's the reason why? Oh, the reason is they had lower extremity weaknesses, and the squat was used to help, mitigate or strengthen those areas, and so therefore they are now faster. So that's a reason, because then that reason can be applied across domains. So then it's not the squat, it's lower limb weakness. And you can very much translate that then to a trap bar, a back squat, a Bulgarian, and now you can start to explain why all these different exercises have the same relative explained variance in a youth demographic to have increase in speed and performance. So then you start to then have that conversation where you now can say, okay, someone, like a research paper comes out, this is like the research topic, I'm going to take a little sidestep, and they say this happens, and people grab that research paper and they say, well, look, Max, someone pushed a sled and they ran faster, therefore we should only push sleds. Again, that's a fact, not a reason. The reason is a sled may have worked on certain muscle groups which are in a horizontal vector, and in the reasoning of that could even go more micro in terms of muscle synchrony, soft tissue development, and all this other stuff. And if we can understand the base layer, then you can understand why baking soda is used in cakes and cupcakes. Like, it's not just like only in cakes. You're constantly this obsessive macro view. We don't understand. Yes, it's a fact. Baking soda is in a cake. It's also a fact it's in a cupcake. So, cool, it's a fact, but the reason it's used there, if I'm not mistaken, it's acidity, or it's baking powder. The rise of it. Maybe baking soda is the rise, whatever. You get the idea. It has a functional reason to it. And I think we should focus more on reasons. But that enters a very nebulous realm of conversation because there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know fascia that well. We like to say it, but we don't know it. We like to say things like muscle synchrony. You can't really measure it that well. We like to say things like elasticity, which is a great general catch-all term that really means nothing as well. And so we have a lot of difficulty with conversation just due to the inefficiencies of our ability to understand the macro level, and also our inefficiencies in communication, what you mean by elasticity versus what I mean, because the colloquial definition of elasticity might be different than the actual scientific, technical definition in terms of like Hooke's law or something, whether that's stiffness or whatever the elasticity law is. And so you have all these layers of uncomfortableness. But then we can just argue if you should squat or not. Like, it's like, oh, well, I don't know, let's just get our pitchforks back out, I guess, and just defend our programs.
Well, I mean, getting back to what you talked about before, where it's like, you have this, you do all that work, like you said, to figure out if it's just 3 reps or 4 reps, right? And you talked about how it's difficult to measure certain things. Do you think that is the inherent reasoning as to why there's limitations in the research? Because in order to actually measure things, it's way more difficult than we're willing to admit.
I think that's part of it. And you can never get mad at research. You can only get mad at the interpreter. So often we blame research. Like, dude, what, you want research to write your program for you? That's not how that works. Like, you gotta, like you're gonna do research to find the purest form of baking soda. It's not gonna bake your cake, like, whatever. I think research is part of it. I think the fundamental nature of strength conditioning has become, unfortunately, deterred away from its origins to an extent, or its utility. There's no difference in strength conditioning and skill strength. We lift weights. I think we work out for a very specific reason. You either work out for one of 3 reasons. You improve a physical quality that is limiting some sort of technical aspect. I want to shoot a step back. I cannot physically shoot a step back because I don't have the eccentric deceleration strength. So you're doing it for a specific skill. You're doing it potentially for injury mitigation. I think this doing X exercise is going to mitigate the likelihood of something occurring. And then the last one is maintenance of something to support the current existence of skills, i.e. I'm LeBron James. I don't need to develop my physicality anymore. I just need to maintain my physicality to allow for skill expression. Because in sport, everything's centrated around the idea of sport itself. And when you look at those three fundamental layers, I don't think you can argue for strength and conditioning to exist anywhere else. And if you consider that within the realm of performance, the same goes for skills. So like if someone has the physical abilities and they're not expressing the skills, it is possible that you might just go on to maintenance certain physical abilities and emphasize the technical, tactical side for them to express the skills. And so that's where you start to have the emergence of like, you only really lift weights, work out, to support the existence of skills. So if I don't know my athlete's subset of skills, am I really actually doing what's absolutely best? And so the athletes I work with, and I'm very blessed to work with a great group of guys, they allow me to intervene at some of that granular levels. We will exchange NBA shot profiling of what it looks like to be a 3-and-D guy. How many dribbles do you take per shot? What's your average time of possession if you're that type of guy? What's your average shot chart? What are the percentages like? How many times do you cut to the rim? And then you start to build a model profile of what that athlete looks like. And then we evaluate our strength conditioning and say, do we have the prerequisite the skill set to actually perform that? If the answer is yes, then we're at a technical, tactical limitation. If the answer is no, there might be certain strength conditioning movements we'll apply in there, but we also need to make sure we merge that in with the actual skill. And so it becomes like, I'm not talking lifting weights. I'm not talking how much do you squat. They pay me to make them more money. Imagine if Apple called me and they're like, hey, Max, we're just going to work really hard to build the best iPhone. Like, aren't you going to like ask the customers what they want? Aren't you going to do A/B testing? Aren't you going to do some R&D, some research? No, we're just going to work really hard. I'd say, well, you're not going to go anywhere. And we have that mindset in strength conditioning, which is like, let's work super hard. And you're like, well, why? And so a conversation I've had with my athletes, and Reed Travis played at Stanford, Kentucky, playing overseas right now. We've had conversations, and he was in the gym once, and he shot a step-back jump shot. I looked at him and I said, I love Reed to death. He'll vouch for this conversation. I said, Reed, when are you going to shoot a step-back jump shot? He goes, what do you mean? I said, if you shoot a step-back jump shot, first off, if we had a big pie chart of all the points you're going to score in a game, probably like 1% is a step-back jump shot. So therefore, 1% of your training should be step-back jump shots. Of that 1%, it's probably occurring because it's an end of a shot clock or a broken possession. So no one really cares if you make it or miss it anyway. It's actually a non-impactful shot. I'd rather have you shoot 40% from the corner because you'll get paid 3.5 for 2 years if you do that. You're like, oh, okay, well, that makes total sense. What are the subsequent skills and physical abilities I need to have to be able to do that? Well, you're going to need to have acceleration, certain deceleration, so you have the capacity to handle some level of fatigue mitigation, but you're not going to be playing 25 minutes. If you're playing 25 minutes in the NBA, congratulations, you're making a lot of money already, right? You're probably going to be playing like 7 to 10 minutes. At least we're trying to get there. And so we're going to have to look at what we really need. And I think when we objectively look at these things from, let's start, if this player came to me and is like, how can I be the best NBA player possible? Well, then let's really sit down and what does that mean? And we have to evaluate how much time we waste, not just how much time we put in. And so we really try and think about the totality of and at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is give us the highest probability for success. I can't guarantee success. If I could, I'd be in the NBA. Sorry, guys, I wouldn't train you. But I can't guarantee success. We're just trying to increase the likelihood. And that's where understanding the sport is really important. Because you read and see things, and they'll talk about defense. I'm a big basketball guy. The objective of defense is not to stop someone. It's to lower the percentage of likelihood of a shot going in. If I take it from 45 to 40%, that's good defense. Most coaches don't think that. They think you got to block someone's shot or steal the ball. Incorrect, Mundo. Nope, not how that works. It's about decreasing the likelihood of a shot going in, which changes the entirety of how we think about basketball itself, or we talk about ball handling and dribbling. Oh, we got to dribble the basketball. Wrong, incorrect. Ball handling doesn't exist in basketball. Ball handling's a rule. It's not a thing. It's literally just a rule that exists. So we care about the movement that coincides with ball handling. I don't actually care about ball handling, because if you can't dribble a ball and you bounce it off your foot and you're an NBA player, we're already in a bigger pickle. So there's all these conversations we start to have to try and evaluate it from a higher level. And if you really get me on a rant, I think the economics of NBA is wildly broken. Wildly broken. On an NBA team, I think there's $258 million paid. No, maybe it's not. I think it is $258 million. Let's say $250 million in a salary cap per year. So the team is paying $250 million. Less than 1% of that, my guess, is paid to the performance staff. $2.5 million. Right? So if I was a hedge fund manager, economically speaking, if I had $250 million under contract of assets, and the only way I can improve that value is by having analysts, and I'm only paying them less than 1%, what kind of hedge fund am I trying to run here? Where I'm the only thing that can extract value out of these guys is the guys I'm not paying. And so it becomes a whole broken economic model, and I think it starts with general management, because if you look at the end of the day, like a strength coach typically gets a player that's been picked, right? And they say, oh, you got these 4 athletes walk in, right? Imagine you and I are strength coaches. We're coaching some NBA team, Sonics. They brought them back. You and I are strength coaches.
Yeah, we're back. We're back with them.
Let's go, baby.
We got Sean Kemp Jr. The third.
I actually went to school with Sean Kemp's sons. And I was Rasheed Wallace's son's reading buddy. Fun fact. Klay Thompson beat him at
Holy
knockout.
shit.
Played with Kevin Love. If you're in the vicinity of me, somehow you're good at basketball. Play with Jeremy Lin's little brother. A bunch of fun stuff. So
Holy cow.
Fun facts. I was not that good. They were. But let's think about it. You and I are in a weight room, and these 4 NBA guys walk in the weight room, right? And they're going to work out. We should know why the hell the GM drafted this guy. Like, what do you want me to do with him? You picked his ass. Like, what do you mean? Coach see me to see what you need to work on. I don't know. You picked him with a hypothesis and a value proposition in order for that person to deliver certain types of performance and projected value asset to be derived out of him. I'm now going to magically come up a training program without ever having direct evaluation upon the initial stages of a draft pick. That's literally like going to buy a house. I'm going to go buy a house, and then I'm going to arbitrarily hire random contractors who I've never spoken with to make it look good. And you're like, well, what do you want it to look like? Make it look good. Like, dude, you bought the house. Like, it's a dump. Like, you don't need to trim the hedges. Or, like, it's a beautiful lot of land, because every player's picked for different reasons. It might be a great lot of land. It might be a great view. It might be a historic house. But you pick the person for a reason. And so often, that GM to coach communication stops there. A coach can only extract the value that currently exists out of a player. Naismith, who was at Boston, went to the Indiana Pacers. Didn't play well with Boston, traded the Pacers, playing really well. The system extracted more value out of him. He didn't magically get really valuable because he went to the Pacers and now, like, ooh, they sprinkle some magic.
They pulled it out of him. Yeah.
The coach did it. But if we think value is a mixture of skill and physical performance, then the only people who can actually develop that are going to be your strength staff and your skill staff, and the extraction is going to come from the system which they operate in, and the general manager is the one who picks everybody. So that's kind of my long-winded rant why the system's broken, because we're kind of stuck in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because you get a player and you're like, well, I don't know, let's find out.
Let's make you jump higher.
Yeah,
like,
right
because I can measure that. And in your sport, you jump to dunk the ball, right? Like,
like imagine if we're at a college and a coach spends a year recruiting a guy and then doesn't tell you what he thinks he will be in his career. You just get him like, hey, make him a better player. Like, I don't know, coach, you recruited the dude. Like, I have no idea what to do with him.
You know what? But I think you said something in there that's going to be really important for our listeners to pull out of it, is the fact of you can instantly add some value now if you are in an opportunity like myself where you're in, football staff meetings, and if you are, or basketball, whatever the sport is, and say like, okay, hey coach, this is your recruiting class. Awesome. Hey, I'm going to reach out to them about, their summer packet, whatever the fuck it is. But like, hey coach, as we go through the different training levels of maturity, and I'm working on just these general principles for this athlete, like, why did you pick this person? What's your hypothesis for them? And for any of the pro athlete or pro strength coaches out there, they can start to have that conversation, right?
Yeah, it's such the guy who is your boss provides you like minimal definition as to what you're supposed to do. Like, you tell me you hired me, Mr. Coach. You tell me what makes you successful. When I sit down with my athletes, the first thing I say is, look, what would make a successful training, 6 months? What would we need to accomplish in order to make you a better basketball player? Because they're the ones, in this case, who are the CEOs who are coming to see me. And that conversation with a coach is like, what do you think this athlete can be, will be, and what will make him successful? And the reality is, it's going to force the coach to audit systems. That's why I said general management and basketball, because technically the GM kind of sits overhead or the president, and like some colleges, you don't really have anyone above the coach. So I understand some of the tyrannical, draconian structures we have going on. But like in the more professional setting, you do have someone who sits above, and it's like we need to have that conversation, because in reality, there's no reason why every athlete should work out for 60 minutes 3 times a week in the weight room. There's zero reason why. Certain athletes might need to spend more time in there, and certain athletes don't need to spend much. Certain guys' careers will never be defined whether or not they squat 400 pounds, but will be defined whether or not they can make 40% from the corner. I know a lot of basketball players who'd give up a step and a half or a step of speed in order to shoot 40% from the three-point line. And when that becomes the factual reality, if I only have a certain amount of time allocated in my day, not all that time needs to be placed with equal emphasis. Some of these skills are non-actionable skills. Getting stronger for some athletes, despite whether we like it or not, is not very actionable. I know some of the guys I work with, we've had people come in, it's like, look, I have 2 things. Like, should I get my shots up today and work on the court, or should I lift? I said, are you kidding? Like, you don't get paid to lift. Like, yeah, no, don't lift. Dude, get out of here. Go work out. And that's the reality. And people say, oh, Max, the NCAA structure doesn't allow that, so on and so forth. Sure, but that doesn't mean you have to make the kid lift. And maybe there's some creative ways you can do it. And I speak from the outside, so I speak in a perfect realm where it's utopic, and I get to have guys at my house for 9 hours in a day, and that's not always how it works. I get it. But I think we should always start with the most optimal situation first, and then work and scale that down to the setting we're in, and chronically try and do the opposite.
You talk about what you've been doing now. What is it that you're doing for anybody that's not familiar?
Oh, I just take shirtless pictures and try okay, sell some programs. No, unless you might steal a line, that's fine.
That's a different line. Yeah.
That's a different business.
Yeah.
Cost extra. I work with a handful of guys and basketball players. AJ Green in the NBA, Reed Travis overseas. I work with Chase and Randall, Ethan Happ. Great guys. We have a good group of guys out here. And the way I see myself is I'm someone who can help. Performance consultant might be the right word. Performance manager. Because I will help discuss levels of skill. I'll help discuss, like, we'll go through shot profiles. I'll go through, I've watched every single shot AJ Green has taken the past 2 years. And we talk and watch basketball film. Just like basketball out in a G League hat and a jersey, which is kind of comical, I guess, now that I say it out loud. But we watch film and we talk about basketball, and we talk about how to make them better at basketball, because it's a very rare opportunity in their life where they're in a situation where they can make the most possible money they can in a given period of time. Playing one more year is more money than I'll ever make in a year. Just playing one more year. And so we have a lot of these conversations, and they allow me to go into all the skills, and we work with stuff in detail. Everything down from if it's finding them the right nutritionist, finding the right massage therapist, finding them the right, Pilates person, all the way to I've been on calls with agents and coaches and whomever it might be. So they've blessed me with a wonderful opportunity to be very involved in what they do. And it's nothing of what you really see on social media. That's one aspect of my life. And I think people are like, oh, you just post videos of you jumping with a band. Sure, that's cool, but like I have another a value performance side, an economics performance side that I very much enjoy. And we talk about analytics and aspects of what we can do there, everything down to we've done like understanding for a certain athlete like an AJ or Reed or whoever it might be, what are the actual specific profiling to make them the best basketball player they can. What would that be as a team effort? We collaborate on it. We sit down and discuss these actions they typically work, these movement patterns. Then it's my job. I can put into words physiologically what they typically can. An athlete will say, I feel like I'm getting stuck. What does that mean? Right? I don't know what that means. Let's go film it. Let's watch some of the actions. And I think it has a lot to do maybe with their hip positioning and certain defensive high hedges on a ball screen. So we go and work on that. And that's the end of I'm just trying to help them be the best basketball player they can be. Not the best guy in the weight room, the best basketball player. It might involve weight room stuff. It might involve talking to their skills coach. It might involve being wherever I can be to help them. It's different than obviously most people can even do, because I'm in a very privileged situation where I can have that with my time I have. And we'll take 5-6 guys, and they'll come over and we have breakfast in the morning at 8:30 a.m. I make pancakes and eggs. We sit down and talk about our day. We have the first workout in the morning, and we're all discussing, trying to figure out what you need to do. What our plans are, it's an active team effort. We'll typically play Call of Duty at some point in the middle of the day, typically Black Ops, and we play Zombies because it's very fun, or Nuketown, and it gets really competitive. We have no workouts before 8 a.m. Actually, no workouts before 9:30 a.m. You need to sleep, go to bed, you're pro. You don't need to wake up at 6. I've kicked people out of a workout because they've worked out too hard the day before. I've had guys drive down and they have had some aches and pains, so we just played video games. I'm not trying to do something because I feel any pressure to do it. I try and really treat them as if they're my brother or myself. And like, let's really sit down and try and... This is a really cool opportunity for me to see how good I can be. How good am I actually? How good can I be to actually help somebody? It's about them. And how much of a resource can I possibly... My ultimate goal is to be an assistant GM. I'm not sure if that'll ever come to fruition. I'd love to be in management. I wouldn't want to be in actual performance as much as I appreciate you performance people. I think the economics of being assistant GM with the physiology and the ability to understand like basketball and value extraction and hypothesis modeling and value mapping within that, and trying to put together like how do we really get the most out of these guys that we select who are undervalued in the market. If I have a two-way guy that I can get to play at a $2.5 million playing scale and they're paid $500K right now, I've already saved our team more money than they pay the entire performance staff. Like, that alone would pay for the performance staff. And so when you start to look at the economics of the sport, it's really screwy because we pay people such no money here, but you can actually get huge margins on guys who are on the market. I got a guy who's on a 4-year, $12 million contract. If I get him for 2 years on the back end of that, and I can get him to play at a $6 million guy a year versus a $3 million guy a year, I have now saved $6 million of capital within that. And so you can start, it's fun, but you can do that as a hypothesis beyond just performance and analytics, but also skill sets. So if you have a team like Patrick Baldwin was drafted by the Warriors in like the 24th pick, or maybe less than that, later than that. He's an interesting athlete. He tested the lowest in all of his G League combine scores, one of the slowest athletes, but he's 6'10" and can shoot the ball. So then you can start to contemplate, is it easy to resolve the speed issue? Because maybe teaching someone to shoot a basketball is really difficult. And they have a value within shooting the ball that is it's lessened because they're not physically athletic enough. But based on our internal auditing and internal research and development, that's actually really easy to fix. So that person getting drafted in like the 28th pick was actually wildly underdrafted based on our own performance modeling. I have this guy for 4 years with a team option on the 4th. I basically have 2 years to try and turn him into a lottery-like pick. And would he have been a lottery-like pick if I can get him to move better? If we deem movement quality being something very easy to teach based on our internal R&D, well, then that's going to derive a lot of value. Or maybe the inverse is true. I can teach someone to shoot. I just get a bunch of freak athletes. I can teach them to shoot. And so now we're looking at the economic value beyond just the statistics and like saying this guy shoots these shots and he makes this at this probability. But what aspects of his performance are actually undervalued because of certain physiological limitations that are easily to resolve, or very easy to resolve. And so it brings up an interesting conundrum there. And you can see it like the Princeton beats Arizona. And I brought up this debate, and people got really mad about it. Big March Madness guy. I picked that game, by the way. Come on, Max, let's go. I made a podcast about it, talked all about it. I said FDU was going to put a scare into Purdue, and they beat him. Arkansas was going to beat Kansas, called that one. You're welcome, guys. The Oracle speaks again. Great coaches beat bad coaches. But the thing about Princeton is all those guys were under-recruited relative to Arizona. And I said recruiting for basketball is broken. Because if those guys were such liabilities on defense because they were so unable athletically to play against Arizona would have just beat them. But clearly, they're not as athletically liability as what we think it is. And so it actually puts in the contemplation, what is the actual specific limit of not athletic enough that can be then taken advantage of by another more athletic player? Because if Arizona's every single player man-to-man was supposedly more athletic and better than them, they could have just easily scored every time. But clearly they weren't so liable on the court that they beat two teams, Missouri and Arizona. So then the question has to become, as recruits, maybe we have totally miscalculated the value of athleticism. Like maybe we've totally botched this. Because if Princeton was such a liability, all of them were too unathletic. Right? Okay, they all would have been beat. But that's not the case. And people go, it's just one game, Max. Well, it's the one game that counts. So sorry.
Yeah.
Like, it's when it matters, and they beat two teams, not just a fluke. And so it makes you really consider how we think about sport as a whole and how these coaches and recruiters are making decisions like this without any sports science background. They're making assumptions. Someone's they're too unathletic. Well, okay, coach, tell me why. Because he didn't stick his elbow in the rim on a dunk? Like, enlighten me. Like, I've spent 8 years learning this stuff, and you're going to just tell me something like this? Like, oh, he's not athletic enough? Why? Because I don't know.
It's all those vague words all the time, right? Like, oh, his explosiveness and his power, and you're just like, huh? Could you elaborate?
What are you talking about? Like, it gets me all worked up because I think that is the crux of the strength conditioning issue, is that we have been put in a situation to fail. Like, you can only do such a good job because at the end of the day, like, your wins above replacement or your responsibility per win has been forced to be so minimal because you're not actually even a coach. Like, you're not involved in that process. That's a really unfortunate. You're the only guy with a coach title who has no say about anything coaching-wise. But
yet you're held just as liable.
Oh, but the skills coach can make these guys run sprints, and they can make them do all these drills on the court, and they can do wall sits, and they can do all this stuff. But if you make a guy shoot a hoop, you buffoon. Like, you fool.
Stay in your lane.
I spend years learning about motor learning and performance and how this all affects it. And so then we just kind of are forced into this pigeonholed area where we get our spears out and we fight for our jobs and we try and defend it. We poke away other strength coaches who come at us because we don't want anyone to get... Because in reality, we're all fighting the same fight, but no one wants to fight that enemy. Like, we're all just trying to poke each other to make sure they don't, take my job. Versus, like, trying to find a way that we can be, like, in the actual realm of performance and help with skills stuff and help with other things. But don't get me started. It's just unfortunate because I've had the luxury to be on this side of it. And you start to realize, basketball's a lot more than, like, how much you lift and how fast you are. Like, it doesn't really matter about that. Especially, I play these guys one-on-one. I always want to play them one-on-one. I always want to get a feel for what a pro is like. And my God, these guys are good. And you realize, like, these guys are really skilled. Like, cool, they can be strong, but these guys are really good at basketball. And at the end of the day, like, there's certain things about basketball that's interesting, and you can talk about it too. Like, on offense, like, people watch Luka Doncic. Oh, should Luka Doncic lose weight? He's heavy. No. First off, the defense can only move as fast as the offense. What you can do? Run to a spot I'm not at yet? Okay. I always hold the asymmetry card because I'm trying to go in front of you, and you have to react to me. Unless you somehow react faster than I can think, I always hold the advantage. And Luka Doncic is a beautiful example because his leverage point is his weight. Same with Nikola Jokic. And if they lost 30 pounds, they would just have no momentum and just be slow. Like, it'd be the world's worst scenario. And so with someone like him, actually maintaining that weight might be a good idea. And so from a strength coach side, a coach might be like, you need to get in shape, you need to lose weight. But then if you really look at a performance side, like, his entire skill is expressed through his actual mass. Like, that is really important to consider. You could make Luka Doncic jump 6 inches higher and lose 30 pounds, and he'd be a worse basketball player. He'd be a worse basketball player. He doesn't play fast. His skills for his whole life have been developed based on utility of mass. Utility of momentum, but specifically momentum with his mass, not his velocity. Ja Morant, the opposite. Ja Morant's a high-velocity momentum guy. And so for someone like Ja, do you want him to get him heavy? Not if it takes away his speed. Heck no. Like, absolutely not. And so then as a coach, we're just giving a guy, and he might be 15% body fat. Well, let's get him down to 8. Cool, you made him a worse basketball player. Like, go back and eat. Like, get out of here. Like, get the biscuits back. Like, we need the mass, baby. That's if you don't know this, but that's because we're not in the sport. And then a coach just gives you somebody, and they say, make it happen. And you're like, oh, I don't know. Okay, sure, we'll lose weight.
Yeah, hey, you said so, coach. Like, I can do that for you.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but it is what it is, I guess.
No, man, I appreciate you taking the time. It's been good catching up with you, brother. Hope all's well. Thank you for your time, and go about the rest of your day, man.
Yeah, I hope someone gets something out of this. I'm not sure if there's any direction to any of this, so I appreciate you guys listening. If you stuck around for the 51 minutes, that's an all-time record. And I probably smoked 40 of it. I shouldn't have had 3 cups of coffee. I apologize in advance.
No, this was awesome, brother. I appreciate you. Later.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.